I've got something cool to show you today. I've talked about my farm in my first two videos, but I haven't shown you much of it yet. And today that's what I'm going to do. I've got a really cool project I'm working on that I think you'll be interested in. So let's get into it. Now, you've probably heard of the most common mushrooms that people farm in the US. There's lion's mane, which I grow a lot of, oysters of various types, shiitake, maitake or hen of the woods, chestnut, pioppino. Then there are the kinds that you find at the Asian grocery store that your farmer's market vendor may not be growing, but are still pretty common and easy to get, like enoki, shimeji or beach mushrooms. Again, shiitake are always there. But there's a whole world beyond that of mushrooms that are cultivatable and farmable and really cool. It's just that they either have some niche substrate requirements that would require a farm setup to scale a completely different workflow, or they have just longer colonization times that make their yields not quite worth the investment. Or we just haven't tried them enough to figure those out. There are millions of different types of mushrooms in the world, and hundreds that we can grow and eat, but you tend to see the same few, right? I'm not saying that's a bad thing on its own. Those mushrooms are great and are way more diverse and better, frankly, than just your grocery store button mushroom. But as I started my farm and was ordering some cultures to play around with, I didn't want to just go with the boring normal ones. I always like to try something new and challenge myself. So one of the first cultures I got was of one of those different types, and that's what I'm going to show you today. We're going straight to full screen so I can show you what I'm talking about. So, with that first order, which I made from the Mycelium Emporium, whose cultures I've loved so far. They have great prices and a great selection of some cool stuff. Anyway, one of those first cultures I got was Sparassis Crispa, or the cauliflower mushroom. I know my webcam doesn't do text very well, but it's a syringe, and you can see in there's some mycelium floating around. It's a little bit cloudy from all of the little bits of mycelium. So I took that, and as you do, added it to my Caro syrup liquid culture, and I was a little surprised there was like a red wormy looking thing in the culture. See if I can get it on camera here. But it seems to just be some compressed mycelium, nothing to worry about. The culture colonized really nicely, and so I took it to grain. I use whole oats. They're cheap, but they have a really good nutrient profile for a wide range of the mushrooms that I'm growing. So I put the culture on some whole oats in 3 jars. I've got these jars right here. And this is where things got really interesting. So oyster mushrooms, if you've ever grown them, are kind of prototypical in how their mycelium is really thick and kind of leathery, and there is no mistaking when oyster mushroom mycelium is colonizing grain. You know, there is like a white cloud that envelops everything. And cloud isn't quite the right term because it's such a solid color. Doesn't feel like it's made out of little thin wisps. It looks like concrete was poured into the jar over your grains. Cauliflower mushroom is different, and I learned this as I went along. So anyway, I'm going to show you one of these jars. You can probably guess where this is going, because this just looks like oats. Except right there, a little bit of white. And then you look close, and right there, you can see that there's more white. And I'm going to tilt this, and you can see it's not just individual oats, which, by the way, I put a lot of gypsum in this, not a massive amount, but enough that they don't stick together on their own. Now I've got this jar all the way upside down. Something's holding these loose oats together, that you almost can't see. And I just thought this was so cool. But not at first. At first, I thought nothing was happening. Because my oats just looked like oats. I inoculated these, as you can see, on the 29th of December. And about midway through January, I was concerned because they looked, well, just like this. So anyway, I was concerned that nothing was growing. It looked like nothing was growing. So I took the LC and just dropped it straight onto one of my agar plates. And this happened. I think you can see it pretty well. It's growing, it's just really thin. And it doesn't seem to really fully establish itself at any one spot. But it's vigorous. There was a tiny drip of agar that stuck to the lid, and it climbed up and is eating that too. So this culture is still alive. This isn't bacteria or mold or yeast in there. This is mushroom culture. So I gave it a little more time, and sure enough, as you can see in there, there is mycelium connecting all of these oats. This one moved like a full cake when I turned it upside down, but it's in there and fully colonized. If I shake it up, it takes a little doing, but you can see parts are still sticking together. If I really give it a shake, you'll notice it just looks like oats again. And that's what's so weird. So I shaked and braked my first jar, and it looked like nothing. And I waited and waited and waited, and it was colonized again. Now this one has one spot that I'm a little concerned about right there. I think that's just where a burned oat is being eaten by the white mycelium, but it could be black mold. So this jar, which did have a port of sorts, just a hole punched in it with some surgical tape over it, and a wide mouth jar with the flipped lid. So it did have more airflow. It could be contamination. So I'm going to do this one separate. But these two jars seem good to go and ready. So I'm going to spawn these two at the least today. But I wanted to, one of the reasons I wanted to make this video is that there's not much info about how to grow these things. So I'll document the process and show you guys, so that hopefully, if anybody else wants to try out this cool mushroom, they'll know a little more whether I succeed or fail with this attempt. I will definitely give it another try if I do fail, but we'll all learn together. Anyway, that's all to say, this mushroom is not going on my normal substrate mix. I went out yesterday in the snow to pick up some pine pellets. What I got was cat litter, actually. It is 100% pine, though. I checked the packaging and the manufacturer's website just to make sure that I wasn't getting any glues or binders or anything like that. But nope, this brand of cat litter that I got is 100% pine, and it's essentially the exact same product as my hardwood fuel pellets that I have, made from oak, and then another made from a mix of hardwoods. This is just that, but pine. And they're kiln dried and pressed, just like those fuel pellets, which also converts some of the harsher chemicals in them so that the mushrooms can a little better digest them. That's obviously not the point of kiln drying cat litter pellets, but it does accomplish that. So these are going to go on mostly those softwood or pine pellets. I'm going to supplement it with some hardwood sawdust that I have, just because I've also read that cauliflower mushrooms like a really dense, tightly packed substrate. So I'm going to supplement it with some of that denser hardwood sawdust that I have in bricks, and a little bit of gypsum and crushed oyster shells. I'm going to go about 1% oyster shells by weight. Pines and other softwoods are very acidic, and while this mushroom in the wild does eat pines as its main tree food, if you will, it still can create an environment, if it's just pine, that is too acidic for the mushroom. So I'm going to balance the pH a little bit. The gypsum will be a little bit of a buffer, and the crushed oyster shells are pretty coarse, so it'll not only give some texture for the mycelium to hold on to in there, to supplement the oats in that regard, but it'll also gradually raise that pH over time without all at once shocking the mushroom into a really basic environment. So we're going to see how it goes. I'm doing this in unicorn bags. I'm going to shoot for about 5 pounds of substrate. A couple reports I saw online said that these guys need a lot more substrate, like upwards of 5 kilos, and I don't have a setup to do that, so I'm going to do it a different way. And I know that in Asia, where they bottle farm this stuff, they use containers about this size, like maybe 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds at most of substrate. They bottle farm, so using the same industrial setups, just a little bit different substrate that they use to grow king oysters and shimeji and enoki and all those other species that are so easily bottle farmed using those industrial mechanized methods. We're going to try it the analog way, and I guess without further ado, I'll get into the lab. The rest of today involves a lot of waiting while I pressure cook everything, so I'm not going to make you watch that, but to sum it all up, I rehydrated my oats by boiling them for a while, then I let them cool and dry. While that was happening, I rehydrated those pine pellets that I bought, along with a chunk of that hardwood sawdust brick. Once that was hydrated and sort of pasteurized, though I am going to pressure cook these, I added that to the bags until we were right about 4.5 to 4.7 pounds. Once I add in the spawn later, it'll hit that 5-pound mark. And then the last step, I took a palmful of those crushed oyster shells, which I had weighed out and was roughly that 0.05 pounds that I needed for 1% of the weight. And I tossed those in and shook the bags to mix everything together pretty well. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want... it's better to have things mixed than the sort of all-in-one grow bag setup where the grains are completely separate from the wood or the manure or whatever the substrate you're using is. For this part of the process, because I'm going to be spawning in colonized grain, I want everything pretty well mixed to give it a nice landing zone. I also made a central depression in each of the grow bags. I expect as pressure cooking happens, that will kind of get smushed a little bit, but I can always re-indent them. The purpose of that is to give these mushrooms, which produce a really big, frilly head, an anchor point. In the wild, you'll sometimes find what looks like a taproot growing down into the roots of the pine tree on which they're feeding. And it's not a true root, but these mushrooms do like to have a pretty firm bit of fungus holding them in place. So I made some indentations in the center of each of the bags. We'll see if they hold up. If not, I'll redo that after pressure cooking. And when I spawn in the grains, the thought is that lots of them will kind of pool up in that central depression. And CO2 will also pool there, as will a little bit of moisture, which will give those first few pins a really nice anchor point to grow from. If you're growing Sparassis, whether Crispa or Americana or any of the species, let me know. I'd love to hear how they're going. I'll be back to show you if anything cool happens, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm Matt, and this is Phaewild.